Oh, hello there. I'm Jimmy Shuker alongside Albert Chalmers, and this is Radiant Light, a spiritual discussion podcast, episode 16. On today's episode, we're welcoming back long-term friend of the podcast, Daniel Sternlöf, to discuss the ancient philosophy of Stoicism. This was a fascinating conversation where we noticed many parallels between Stoicism and Zen Buddhism. And believe it or not, things even got a little bit political towards the end. If you enjoy our content, don't forget to like this episode and subscribe to our YouTube channel, as well as whichever platform you listen to your podcasts on. And you can even follow us on Instagram too. Radiant_light_podcast. And you can always reach out to us at radiantlightpodcast1, that's the number 1, at gmail.com. And with that being said, let's take you to the episode. Daniel, welcome back to the Radiant Light studio.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you here again.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Albert, how are you doing today?
Good, man. How about you?
Yeah, fantastic. Feeling really good. Looking forward to getting stuck into this topic today. So today we're going to be discussing the ancient philosophy of Stoicism.
Yes.
So Daniel, you're really into Stoicism now. In layman's terms, what is Stoicism and how did you get into this?
Oh, that's layman's terms. Well, I'll start with how I got into it. It's probably the easiest way. I've lived my life a certain way, and suddenly I was just scrolling through YouTube, and I see this video, thinking it was like a clickbaity video. It's just how to become unstoppable.
Wow.
Stoicism.
Okay. Grabbed your attention straight away.
Yeah, grabbed me instantly, and that's why I was like, it might be clickbait, maybe not. Who knows? So I watched it, and I realized that, whoa, this is sort of how I viewed my entire life. And the layman's terms main aspect of Stoicism is this controlling reaction to events and not letting exterior events affect us as much as today's society allows.
So only focus on the things primarily that we can control.
Exactly.
If something's out of our hands, we don't need to react to it.
No.
Certainly not hysterically anyway.
Exactly. Because the more we react to external events, of course there's events that we can't control that are going to affect us.
But happens all the time.
But smack talk, one of those that's very typical in today's society, is something that we should try to not react to, because it's only going to cause us more mental strain and mental pain. And the more we can control our reaction to events, the better we will feel in the long run. And the more control we have over our reaction, the more we can control our emotions.
So we'd be in a better position to kind of proceed through life, is what I feel like you're alluding to here.
Yes. It's very, very important.
I've got here on my notes somebody who remains calm under pressure and avoids emotional extremes.
Yes. Well, I'm not one to speak about not reacting to emotional extremes.
Hey, look, we've all been there, you know. Like you said, you lived your life a certain way, and then the Stoicism, presumably calmed you down a little bit? Or?
No, the Stoicism was more putting to words how I was trying to live.
Okay.
Like reinforcing how you already were living, and then understanding it better when someone else explained it.
Yes. What it was as soon as I watched this video and they were like, well, try to control your emotions, control your temper, and not react to things you can't control, suddenly a light bulb just lit above my head, and I was like, oh, is that what it's called? Is that what I've been not living by, not fully, but is that what I've been trying to imitate all my entire life? And now I had this concrete ideology or philosophy that I could delve deeper into and understand more.
Yeah, it sounds like you kind of had a sense for it, kind of like a vibe for it,
Yeah.
but then this video was articulated what you were thinking and feeling.
Yes, very much so.
So, do you have some examples then how Stoicism has perhaps kind of helped you in your day-to-day life? Or?
Oh, well, I have a past. We all have a past.
Oh,
and
God, yeah.
coming to grips with that past is a lot easier when you look to the philosophies of Stoicism. Coming to grips with what in our past we could control and what we can learn from it. Like, you could have said something to someone, and yes, at that point it was in your control, but today that shouldn't harm you as much because you can't control what has happened. You can control your reaction to a similar event. You can control how you act in a similar situation, but you just have to come to grips with, that's how I reacted, that's in the past, now I know, now I learn, now I grow.
Yeah, like there's no point in beating up on past Daniel. You know, he did what the best he thought he could have done in those circumstances with the knowledge that's available to him.
Yeah.
But now you have the Stoicism, you're focusing what is within your control.
What is more relevant?
Yeah, relevant.
What is in my immediate peripheral, so to speak, and what of that in my immediate peripheral that I can actually control and handle without it putting too much strain on myself.
Super. Albert, have you been quite into Stoicism yourself recently? Or?
I kind of like the connection between Zen Buddhism and Stoicism and trying to understand where they overlap, where the parallels, like, for instance, you were saying about the past. It's kind of like not letting your past determine how you are in the moment. It's kind of like the karma theory in Buddhism about every action has a consequence, but also trying to transcend all the baggage of your past, because I feel like a lot of people carry that with them. And dealing with it in the Stoic way is maybe different than the Christian way or the Buddhist way or whatever, but it's like maybe helpful for certain people, how they're wired. I don't know exactly if it's like a personality thing. Maybe it's more to do with the individual, but it gives you a different perspective on how to deal with things.
Well, as soon as Daniel said just a moment ago about how coming to terms perhaps with how past Daniel might have dealt with a situation and that's gone and there's nothing we can do to change that apart from live in the now and make our decisions in this present moment, I'm straight away seeing a lot of similarities with Zen Buddhism. It's almost like Stoicism's kind of like the Zen Buddhism of the West, maybe.
One thing that separates Stoicism from Zen Buddhism is specifically the view on suffering.
Okay.
Is within Stoicism they try to decrease the suffering, while Buddhism speaks about life being a constant suffering.
Oh yeah, and embracing the suffering and transitioning. Yeah.
While Stoicism tries to more turn away and ignore the suffering, Zen Buddhism confronts it and goes head on.
Okay.
You lean into it as opposed to trying to minimize it. But in Stoicism, I guess a lot of the suffering is voluntary.
Yes.
You're choosing to allow the emotions to control how you're feeling, when really you should just focus on hard work or a goal or something like.
And Albert, did you mention previously when we were talking before the show a lot of references to Stoicism in the Holy Bible, like a Christian perspective on it?
And it says that Paul met the Epicureans and the Stoics when he was in Athens. And he preached to them when he was on Mars Hill. So I guess there was kind of a point in history when they collided. And I think that perhaps certain people like yourself have taken from both and combined them into like we're all doing, right? we're taking little pieces of things and then trying to find the balance or
Build our own
Yeah,
puzzles.
absolutely. Like we spoke about in one of the early episodes, we discussed how Zen Buddhism is kind of like a philosophy that we can inject into our daily lives
Yeah.
and cultures. Kind of a similar thing with what you're doing, Daniel. You know,
Yes.
you talked in, I think it was episode 7 where we discussed Christianity
Yeah.
and Jesus, very much your religion, your
Yeah.
faith, but then, you know, fantastic to inject a bit of Stoicism in
Yeah.
as a bit of a philosophy to guide you through life as well, right?
Yeah, and I wholeheartedly believe that our lack of philosophy in society is what's causing its collapse. We see people stressing and getting depressed even more now than ever, especially in the first world countries. Why is this so? Well, I believe it's because we're losing a lot of the philosophical understandings of morals and ethics and these questions that philosophy actually answers. Religion, for me, answers a certain amount of questions of life, but then there's also philosophy that can answer a different amount of questions.
Well, kind of like we're focusing on our desires more than
Yes.
general practical wisdom to guide us through
Yeah.
life. Yeah.
Cognitive dissonance is a massive problem where we fight with our higher moral selves and our desires. We know that some of our desires might be wrong or unhealthy or cause strain and pain, whilst our higher moral self understands this but still allows us to fall into these desires. And coming to grips with our higher self is what's going to make us eventually feel better, and understanding and actually putting up these guardrails around us of what we accept and what we don't accept, and not just let anyone push us over, and not let anything that happens to cause us pain.
yeah, defining your boundaries, right?
Exactly. Boundaries are very, very important. And in today's society, we're not really allowed to have boundaries. Everyone should have the same views, but the truth is that we're never going to have the same views. People are going to have different ideas and ideologies and ways to look at life, and that's okay. But this lack of philosophy, of understanding the deeper questions of who we are, how we get through tough times, how we act in certain situations, is something that we need to delve deeper into. In today's society, I don't think I've ever heard anyone ask the question, let's discuss philosophy.
Yeah, no, I mean, hardly ever, right?
It's mainly, let's discuss politics.
Have you heard of the demagogue?
What's the demagogue?
So in Socrates' philosophy, he spoke about the demagogue, which was a politician who used the emotions of the lower class, uneducated people to rile them up. Kind of like a Trump or any politician that's using the innermost emotions. He's tapping into that.
Okay.
Whereas you have the Stoic, like Marcus Aurelius, who was a Roman emperor. He used that to rule the Roman Empire,
Mm-hmm.
and he was like the antithesis of a demagogue.
Okay.
He was,
the opposite.
yeah, exactly. He wrote a book called The Meditations, and he says that basically you shouldn't use the emotions of your subjects. You should give them freedom instead and let them decide for themselves.
Wow.
So he was more of a proper leader in the same way that you read about in the Tao Te Ching and stuff, about a leader who steps back and watches his subjects.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah.
In the previous episode where we discussed Lao Tzu and Taoism, we actually said the best leader is the one that steps so far back that you barely even know he exists. So that's another similarity that we're seeing here, right?
Yeah, but Daniel was saying that today we're just focusing on politics instead of philosophy, and our leaders are just demagogues. They're just using emotions to polarize.
Yeah.
Like, are you this or are you that? You have to make a decision,
Yeah.
and you get them riled up,
Right,
and we're
okay.
against this, and we're against them, and we have to fight them. And then you're in the same empire or country,
But we're so divided.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. It's such an excellent point that you're making there. Yeah, it's like, dare I say it, failed leadership in a way,
Yes,
and what leads to a
definitely.
broken society.
Definitely.
And when you put on top all of that, you consider what we kind of alluded to earlier. Everybody's fighting that internal battle within.
Yeah.
A bit of philosophy is going to help wonders, isn't it?
It's going to do wonders for your mental health. It's going to help you, even if, like, my view is my religion is what guides me most of the time. Stoicism is also something that can help me when my faith falters, when I feel like I feel like I can't trust Jesus today as much as I don't feel him being as near as he actually is, then I can lean onto something else that can help me. Yeah, and it's very important to have this understanding of life, of our morals, of our values. You can see it everywhere when people are arguing. They always come into these ditches where they don't know what to say because they haven't thought about it. And this is the issue with politics today that I express a lot of the time, is that, well, whether you're right or you're left or you're in the middle somewhere, usually people on the right, they'll say, I'm on the right. Why are you on the right? Because I am.
Because my parents were.
Because my parents,
Yeah.
or because my friend showed me this, or because they are wrong.
But they're like forced to have an opinion without actually building up the necessary integrity to have that opinion.
Yeah.
They're just deciding that they're right, and then
or left. Like,
I mean right as in
right as
not
in
wrong.
correct.
Yeah,
Okay.
correct.
Well, my view is I don't care if you're right or left, as long as you can argue your point, or not argue, but discuss and be honest.
Yeah, the ability to have a practical, respectable debate with somebody. Have you looked internally and kind of asked, well, do I really believe this? Is this how I truly feel? Or am I just regurgitating something that I heard from my parents or off of a TV screen? So
Exactly. And that's where politics falls very, very short in today's society. And that's why I believe society is falling apart, is people are just picking sides without understanding what that entails.
Or trying to understand the other perspective.
And yeah, definitely. They never try to understand another point of view, because as soon as they chose a side, they believe that they're correct. That's the absolute truth.
It's called ideological possession. But then you're just creating a barrier between the other person, so that when you're speaking, I'm just trying to wait till you're finished so I can like counter your move and then be like overwhelming you with emotion.
Exactly.
yeah, not actually listening to his point of view and considering his thoughts.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think I mentioned in a previous episode as well how it's or what I believe and what I've heard as well, it's much stronger position to look inside and say, well, how could I be wrong about this?
Yeah.
You know, there's like this little extra speck of information that is out there that I could be wrong about, and then there's this even bigger spectrum that I don't even have a clue about, that I'm not even going to gain the knowledge to unless I actively seek it. In Zen Buddhism, there's quite a big emphasis on just sitting with oneself, you know, in a state of yin, and not spending some time alone in solitary, in order to build one's wisdom and gain enlightenment. Is that the same in Stoicism, or are there some differences?
Well, there is a lot about actually, like, I wouldn't say that it's this idea of meditation in Stoicism, but meditating over our actions, meditating over our feelings, meditating over anything we go through, and just try to find what parts can I control and what parts can't I control. For example, a family member passing, I can't control that, but I can control how I react. And yes, that's a tough situation to be in, but coming to terms and understanding your emotions and letting your emotions flow will help you in the long run, instead of trying to push it all down and squeeze it back. Just
repress it.
instead of repressing it, what I like to do is I like to take nature showers. is I just go out into the forest, either with music or without music, and I just sit, or I walk,
Beautiful.
or I just relax. Is there a deeper meaning to it? Not really, but there are studies proving that just doing nothing can help your mental a lot, like a lot.
Yeah.
There was I don't remember what his name was. There was a psychologist a long time ago who said that what he liked to do in his free time was he said that he'd go out and he'd stare at a tree.
Wow.
He'd just sit there and he'd stare dead on, just look at the tree for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and that would help him. And there are scientific evidence that helps because it stabilizes a bunch of neurochemical things in your brain and helps you reset.
So it's actually scientifically backed as well.
Yes,
then. Wow.
definitely.
There's something very zen about that example that Don was just given us, isn't there, Albert?
I feel like there's probably several places where they're overlapping, and just it's cool that the West has its own form of Zen in a way. Of course, it has nothing to do with Buddha or anything, but I think if you took a Stoic and a Zen Buddhist and had them discuss, they would just agree more than they would disagree on most things, to be honest.
That's kind of what's happening here today, isn't it?
Well, I guess,
Yeah. I mean, this has been a beautiful conversation, and I'm really happy that we've taken the time to sit down and discuss Stoicism, because it just feels so relevant to the foundations of our podcast and Zen Buddhism. So many similarities that we've highlighted here today, and kind of feels really important, and like we've got a bit of a responsibility now that we're putting this content out there to encourage more peaceful conversations out there in the world. Like thinking about what you said about the state of politics these days and society being so divided. Like, I mean, I speak for myself here, but how do you guys feel? I feel like Stoicism and philosophy in general is really, really needed in today's day and age. I hope we're encouraging that.
Yeah,
definitely.
It'd be cool if there was a Marcus Aurelius type leader out there. Unfortunately, I just see a bunch of demagogues running around and spewing hate. It's not a lot of integrity left. And I'm a little bit cynical. Like, I'm not a cynic in the philosophical way, or at least maybe that's another episode we could do, the cynicism. But I'm not nihilistic or cynical, but I do think that this downward trajectory that we're on should definitely be it would be nice.
I mean, I want to finish this up on a positive note as well, though. I feel like there are people out there in the world that are kind of pushing the same kind of, and pushing the same agenda and encouraging unity as the way we are here on the Radiant Light and people that are doing it on a much higher scale than we are. For example, like, we've all got people that we look up to, not necessarily politicians, I suppose.
I don't think I look up to any politicians. Philosophers and psychologists and ministers, yes, but no politicians.
I feel like I want to give a shout out to Joe Rogan in this example.
Yeah.
It was on the Joe Rogan Experience where I was listening in, and I actually first heard the concept of, just before you go to bed at night, put on a little bit of ancient philosophy, and just overall it will do wonders for your mental health. I'm sure that's where I heard it.
He loves Musashi, and he has a tattoo of Miyamoto Musashi.
Oh wow!
Who's a Zen Buddhist samurai. So I think he obviously has read a lot of different things, but he's brought on Jordan Peterson and guys onto his show who have then gone on to other shows, and it's like it's not even underground, but it's mainstream, but it's not like at the higher politician level. It's more on this intellectual level, I guess.
Yeah, it feels like it's a movement.
Yeah.
It's almost mainstream, but maybe not quite there yet.
Don't they call it the intellectual dark web? And it's like a group of gentlemen, and Ben Shapiro's in there, and there's a gang of them. They mostly lean conservative, but Joe Rogan's more liberal. So there is a, what do you call it? There's room for discussion at least.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the way Joe Rogan always says, I tend to lean left. He doesn't say, I'm a Democrat. He says, I tend to lean left. His language is keeping him open-minded to the other side. And I'm sure same with, well, okay, maybe he phrases it slightly different. Peterson is very open-minded, I would say. He articulates his point well. He's grounded in what he believes in, but he is actually listening to the other person's point of view, right?
Yeah, definitely.
The problem was that he's saying you haven't done your homework. You haven't even gone to the Bible or the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius or any of these Tao Te Ching. Like, we are at least trying to do some homework to figure out how to improve our situation and mental situation, whereas other people are just complaining. And that's what Marcus Aurelius says not to do. He says never complain even to yourself, because you set up this kind of victim mentality, right?
Yeah.
It's like the spelling of the words, like we spoke about before the show, Albert. You say, I don't do that, rather than I can't do that. You know, you're not putting limitations on yourselves. It's what we need more Tao, more flow. Well, I really hope and feel that we're doing our small part here on the Radiant Light podcast of, you know, whatever that can be to encourage
delving deeper.
Yeah, delving deeper, looking within, communication, bringing people together and shedding a bit of radiant light, you know? Yeah. Until then.
First and foremost.
Yeah, exactly. Until then, stay
zen.
Amen. Okay, that appears to be all we have time for on today's episode. If you enjoy our content, don't forget to like this episode and subscribe to our YouTube channel, as well as whichever platform you listen to your podcasts on. And you can even follow us on Instagram too. Radiant_light_podcast. And you can always reach out to us at Radiant Light Podcast 1, that's the number 1, at gmail.com. So until next time, good night, God bless, and namaste.